For many people who have experienced early childhood trauma, those memories can get repressed, but then surface years later after something triggers those traumatic feelings from the past. In my experience, unexplained depression, emotional distress, and even panic attacks are sometimes a way that our body demonstrates unresolved post-traumatic stress, or PTSD as we call it. Some of the symptoms of PTSD include recurring and distressing flashbacks in our dreams, intense psychological distress, or strong physiological responses like panic attacks when you're faced with some cues that resemble the original trauma. Sometimes it's an inability to recall important aspects of the trauma. Many times there's a lot of efforts placed to avoid all thoughts, feelings, or activities that's related or reminds us of that trauma. And one thing that happens many times is a sense of hypervigilance and almost an exaggerated startle response, which makes it difficult for you to fall asleep sometimes or stay asleep. You can also see problems regulating your emotions or unpredictable outbursts of anger. If this sounds like you, don't ignore your body's signal to get some help. I would strongly encourage you to consider seeking a qualified psychotherapist to help you work through what's going on with you right now. Regardless of whether there's any specific memories that have been repressed that contribute to your symptoms, if you've experienced childhood trauma, it may be helpful for you to process through these early childhood experiences. You might find relief from your symptoms just by doing this, but in the process, you may end up discovering repressed traumatic memories that also need to be resolved. Unresolved trauma will often remain locked in our brains, but like a toxic leaking waste bin, they can leak out toxins that lead to physical and emotional symptoms. And even if you don't recall specifically the trauma, we might actually find ourselves reacting strongly to situations that in retrospect shouldn't be such a big deal. It's so important to resolve this trauma so that our body, our brain, and our emotions have a sense of resolution. Not to change the past, because we can't do that, but so we're able to digest the important lessons that's part of experiencing life's challenges, but also being able to let go of the bad stuff. For example, the fear or the shame or the lies about ourselves that was just locked up inside us previously. Often people will experience a sense of freedom as the trauma is no longer holding them back from experiences or relationships they want to pursue. Now, there are a number of really great trauma recovery techniques that are quite effective in helping us move towards this healthy resolution. So for example, one of the techniques we use in our office is called EMDR, which has been shown to be very effective in resolving PTSD symptoms. It's based on capitalizing on how our brains digest trauma in a healthy way, so it works to unlock the unresolved trauma in our brain. But make sure whichever therapist you choose also teaches you techniques to help you stay grounded and in control of your emotional responses so that you can safely process through your trauma with that therapist. You don't want to be re-traumatized by your therapist. Your emotional safety ought to be of the utmost importance to your therapist, and it must be established and maintained to ensure that you're dealing with your trauma in a therapeutic and also safe way. Keep in mind also that trauma therapy isn't meant to be a witch hunt, discovering the facts of what actually happened. Because memories are very susceptible to distortion and there's no way to actually go back into your past to verify the facts of what happened, trauma recovery is actually more about resolving your symptoms and helping you to come to a place of acceptance and peace. So don't spend all of your energy trying to figure out the details of what happened to you. In fact, often the more you try, the more frustrated and depressed you get, especially if you start to overly focus on trying to find out the answers. Instead, focus on the symptoms that need resolving and allow your mind and body to naturally bring forward what needs attention. And for those of us who are Christ followers, it's important to remember nothing takes God by surprise since He knows everything. So trust in His timing as He brings forward traumatic memories that need to be resolved. And if your symptoms are generally resolved and you're beginning to accept and experience genuine peace and joy in your life, accept the ambiguity of not knowing all the answers this side of heaven. Give over to God those who've harmed you, abused you, or traumatized you, trusting that it's going to be up to Him to deal with them and not up to you to make sure they know what they did or that they pay for what they did to you. Focus on what you can do to break free from the traumatic experiences of your past and then choose to let go of the rest. I'm Dr. Merry.